You're listening to the Speaking Tongues podcast. I'm your host, El Charisse. Each week, I sit down to a conversation with multilinguals where we discuss and celebrate language, life, and culture through our own perspectives. Episode 57, Speaking Farsi. Hello, language lovers. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Speaking Tongues, the podcast and conversation with multilinguals. Today, my guest is Candace, and we're talking about learning Farsi, visiting Iran, and connecting with Iranian culture. I was so excited to talk with Candace about her visits to Iran and how experiencing a new culture led her on the path to learning Farsi. In this episode, Candace talks to us about visiting Iran for the first time and how the prospect of visiting first came into her life. She tells us about the road trip she took and the way she was sparked to learn the language after returning to Australia. We talk about encountering cultural differences throughout Iran through her travels and connecting with the Iranian community in Sydney. Candace also shares the methods that she's been using in order to learn Farsi and shares a few milestones that she's celebrated along the way. Big thank you to Candace for this thoughtful and inspiring conversation and for your wit and humor, and of course, for sharing your story with all of us. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Speaking Tongues podcast on Apple Podcasts so that other language lovers like ourselves can find the show. And if you've been a longtime listener of the show or even a recent listener, you can now support the show on buymeacoffee.com. Links to all platforms are in the show notes. Okay, let's chat. Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Tongues. I'm here with Candace. How are you today, Candace?
Salam, Aljuna. I'm very well, thank you. And very excited. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you and learn about your languages. So I like to start each episode with the same question, and that is, what languages do you speak and what is your first language?
Okay, so I speak English, which is my first language. I've also studied Japanese for 8 years, and I actually remember very little. And now I am in my third year of actively learning Persian or Farsi. Yeah.
Exciting.
Mm.
So when you were growing up, so let me just say this because I didn't say, but if you're listening, you can probably hear Candace is in Australia. So
Mhm.
in Australia, and you're in Sydney, right?
I am, yes.
Okay. So when you were, I guess when you were growing up, what languages did you hear spoken in your home or in your community?
It was 100% Australian English. um, and I'm going to specify, or be quite specific there for two reasons. One is, I guess, identity, and I think it's probably quite apparent in my accent. The other one is we have our own, I guess, rules and formalities and things like that, and even three primary accents within Australia and English as well. But just the colloquialisms and slang and stuff like that, yeah, my household was 100% Australian English. Very casual.
Wow. And what about in your community?
My community was still very Australian English. I was fortunate enough in primary school in two cities to go to schools that had a high Indigenous population within our schools, and the second primary school that I went to, which is down the road from my mum's house still, is it's called Wurundjeri, which means creeping vine in the local language, and they have a large Indigenous population there, attendees and programs as well. I still think it's the case today, but in saying that, we never had Indigenous language in any of those classes, but we
Right.
did have, I guess, it around, yeah, which is
Yeah.
a whole other conversation and a problem.
Seriously. Yeah. No, I was thinking that as you're saying, like, it's, I guess, similar to here, where there's a lot of names of states and cities and parts of, the country that have indigenous
Hmm.
names attached to them, but, you know, we never had any understanding of anyone who spoke an indigenous language. And well, I grew up in New York City, so I would imagine maybe like in the Southwest, it's, maybe different, where there are more active, like, indigenous communities. But
Hmm.
um, Australian English,
Mm.
what does that mean?
I would say that it's quite, it's very casual. We've got, as I said before, there's I think three primary accent types. One is general, which is I would say mine, which is you'd hear anywhere in Australia. The other is broad, which is your Crocodile Dundees and Steve Irwin's, that kind of lingo. And then cultivated, which is, I guess, highly educated city folk, or those, yeah, higher educated or city folk or people that are wealthy, or you know what I mean. So
Hmm.
yeah, a bit more refined.
When you were in school, and I guess you said you studied Japanese,
Hmm.
what kind of languages were you exposed to? What kind of languages were compulsory to study, or which languages were offered to students?
Well, if my memory serves me, I should say, where I went to school, especially in primary school or elementary school, Japanese was all that was available to us. I think that is just like a geographical reason, though, due to economic relationships or regional economic relationships that we had. So, where I grew up on the Gold Coast, it is very much a tourist hotspot, and going to school through the 90s, Australia had a very big tourism boom, especially related to Japan and Japanese tourists, and it still
Hmm.
remains that way today. So, Japanese was heavily advocated for, and it's really the only language I recall within primary school at that time. As I moved through school into high school, Japanese continued to be on offer, and I think we also had French and German, but
Hmm.
only the one class, and it was quite limited in the applicability or the students that really wanted to go. They were very small.
Yeah.
So Japanese, yeah, continued to be quite prevalent in at least where I grew up.
Was it a requirement or was it optional?
Uh, Primary school was a requirement from memory, and then in high school it was optional.
Okay.
Mm.
And what was that like? And I'm asking because I think, here Spanish is our popular second language.
Hmm.
So, and there's some people have all different types of how they relate to having to take Spanish. Some people find it useful, some people think, "Ugh, I can't be bothered." How was it with Japanese? Because, Japanese is, you're having to learn, I guess, a different writing system,
Hmm.
and etc. So how was that experience?
I For me, I'm going to speak personally that it was like a first love for me. It was my first insight into a new culture, new sounds, different ways to communicate. They would entice us in classes in primary school with food, um, and also for me the concept of travel. No one in my family previously had really travelled outside of Australia, so to think that that was even a concept, it just kind of, yeah, it blew my mind open a little bit. And I really only recall fond memories of learning language in school. And I think that really kind of stems from the continuous joy and curiosity that it sparked in me in those classes, and I just fell in love with it. For everyone else, I think it's going to be different. There were some of us that did carry it through to high school, but some, of course, loathed the class. They didn't enjoy it. Yeah, so I think everyone's the same, right?
Yeah.
People learn differently. People have different interests. So, it's fair to say that not everyone enjoyed it. But I did, and I kept going.
What was it about Japanese that you enjoyed?
Good question. I just think how different it was. I'd not come across anything like that in my day-to-day life before. As I said, I was very much a stock standard Australian in my everyday life. It was just something so wildly different, and being, I think, a curious person, it just was that fodder that I needed to kind of keep me intrigued. And it, I don't know, there's something, I'm sure a lot of listeners and yourself are going to resonate, that it's language, there's something about it. It's more multifaceted, or there's more dimensions to language than other styles of, I guess, like learning. This is my opinion. Things like, maths or sport and all that kind of stuff. It's just like, nah, not my jam. Yeah, so I think that's, just the curiosity of it all for me.
Have you visited Japan?
I have. I was not in a fortunate position through any of my schooling to go on any exchanges or things like that. But in 2017, my partner and I traveled there. I think it was just under 2 weeks, or just over 2 weeks. And it was the best. It
Oh
was the
my
best.
gosh.
Um,
How long
it
had it
was,
been at that point since you were like studying Japanese?
oh my goodness. I want to say like over 20 years maybe.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I hadn't studied Japanese there was a big gap in that. So I took Japanese all the way through to university. But in my first year of university, towards the tail end, I had to drop out for personal reasons. And then my kind of language learning path dissolved after that. Then, yeah, just wanted to go on a holiday, 15, 20 years later, and chose Japan. And it was incredible. Absolutely incredible. Extremely humbled when I got there with how degraded my Japanese had been.
That was my next question. Like, how did you do?
Very confronting, very humbling, just at how much time and effort you put into something for it just to dissolve. But still fun, and still took opportunities to use it where I could. Yeah.
Would you ever want to go back into studying Japanese?
Oh, I like this question. Yes, I do. I do. I'm yet to find a time and place to devote to it, because if I did, I would want to. I'd want to really get functional in it again, and have a purpose for it. I like to think about things a bit deeper and have a purpose, or to have a stronger sense of value with something. And I don't yet have that for Japanese again. And the majority of my language learning is devoted to Persian at the moment, and I feel like I'm not yet there yet to do things in tandem.
Right,
I'm
right.
not confident enough to do that, and I also feel like I'd be cheating a little bit.
Cheating on Persian.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah, no,
yeah,
I get that. I get that.
yeah.
Because you
I'm very.
develop these relationships, it feels like somebody's with you, you know? It's
It
like,
is. Yeah, it's a significant, I think, yeah, companion for me, or I've got a deeper bond with it and I'm still not as confident as I would like to be. And I know that's quite arbitrary, and that time never really comes. But as I move through the intermediate stage, and as I focus on areas that I want to improve, I can feel that change. And I know that it's like just around the corner.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm close. Maybe next year.
Okay. You mentioned purposeful,
Hmm.
um, and approaching a language with purpose and intention.
Hmm.
Um, and we are here to talk about Persian. Oh wait, before I even go any further, should I say Persian or should I say Farsi?
Depends who you're speaking to, I think. So Persian is the exonym, and then Farsi is the endonym. So inside the language and the culture, it's Farsi, and then outside they like to refer to it as Persian. I guess it's kind of like Spanish and Espanol. You know, it's the same thing.
Okay.
Mhm.
So,
Up to
for
you. I'm not precious about it.
I keep saying Persian, and I don't know why, because my whole life I've been calling it Farsi my whole life. And recently I started calling it Persian. And then I realized, or I didn't realize, but I read that like Persian also includes other languages spoken in and
Hmm.
around Iran, like
Yes,
Dari and et cetera, et cetera. So
Pashto and things like that. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, that makes sense. It does
Yeah.
make sense. I guess if you're really trying to be specific, then Farsi. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely specific to Iran.
So back to my question, you mentioned purpose and intent with learning a language. And you are learning Farsi. So how did Farsi come into your life? How did you come to this purpose and intent of wanting to learn the language?
It's really a bit of a like breadcrumb trail for me. But the most significant part of it was in the end of 2017. I wanted to travel, and kind of similar to what I mentioned before, is that being curious and wanting to see things so starkly different to my everyday life or what I know. I was originally looking to travel to Israel and Jordan. So as I was looking around on travel blogs and things like that, Iran just kept popping up and kept popping up again. So I felt like it kept stealing my attention. And the more I looked into it, it's like, oh, okay, this is where I need to go. And come, I think this time, I think it was actually today. This time 3 years ago, I was in Iran for the first time on holiday, and I think those two ideas as a one concept together is baffling to some people, to have Iran and holiday together on in the same sentence. But my goodness, if you do get a chance, please go. And yeah, so that's moving into preparation for your holiday. You want to learn, the etiquette and the social phrases that are part of everyday life, numbers, so I know how much I'm paying for things, all that kind of jazz. And
Important.
yeah, and I did a bit of prep before I went over and didn't really think much of it. And when I got there, it's like, wow, okay. And then you're using these little phrases with people and engaging with people that are so different from you, but you are both human. And having that exchange is like, oh, this is why I love language.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, now I've got that spark again, and when I came back, I just looked for any any language resources that I could. So started on YouTube. I think I bought two textbooks that I didn't touch again for like another year because um, yeah. So just jumped right into it after my first trip. I ended up going back the second year as well, so 2019. Again, remarkably humbled by how much I didn't know. I'm kind of slammed back into my shell again, and yeah, it just continued ever since.
That's really interesting that you ended up there. And I'm going to ask this question aware of how stupid it's going to sound,
No,
but
not at all.
had you
No.
gone to, you said Israel or Jordan, right? Had you gone there, do you think you would have like been inspired by the languages spoken in those countries to, because both, I mean, Jordan and Israel are both so robust.
Mm.
Um and I would imagine inspiring as well. But I just I don't know.
I
I'm
never
just
actually thought
curious.
about it, to be honest. Yeah, I haven't, but I think I would. I think I would have. That's gonna stick with me for a while, I think. Yeah, but I honestly do think I would have. And the change in idea from traveling to Israel and Jordan to Iran is nondescript for me. There's nothing that I can pinpoint that show that, nothing in particular that moved me other than intrigue, and
Mm,
it's indescribable. And there's no one true factor. Um, so yeah, answering that question is quite hard because there's no root of that.
right.
So I'm gonna say yes. I would say yes.
What I think is interesting is that it almost seems like you were called there. It seems like you
Mm.
were destined to learn this language and communicate with people, with Iranian people, and people who share this culture who are not Iranian. And I think that's such a beautiful thing.
It it's strange that you say that because I feel that, and again, it's another intangible thing. There's something there that I've never had an association to before, or the people, the culture, or anything, especially I guess the music or religion or anything
Mm.
um, sensical that would tie me. And I think I think a lot of language learners would resonate with that, though, that a lot of us outside of having a heritage language or having a home language, a lot of it isn't tangible, I don't
Right,
think.
right.
So even when I think about how I talk to my friends, when how I came to meet some of my Iranian friends, it just feels right. It
Mm,
just feels meant to be without being like fully philosophical or anything like that. And it's inexplainable.
yeah,
It's weird. It's
yeah.
weird. Yeah. So
I think
interesting
it,
to say
yeah,
that.
I think it's so cool to be in the right place at the right time.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
um I don't think you have to know how to explain it, but you're there and some things can't be explained. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't have my crystal ball on me today. So
Okay.
yeah, I know. I can't get too mystical about it, but I think that's amazing. So what I want to know is, what part of Iran did you go to?
Oh wow. First trip or second trip? Or all?
Let's come on, let's start from the beginning.
From the beginning. Cool. So first trip was pretty much the 101, I would say, through the center. So we started in Tehran, moved to Qom, which is I think it's like the largest Islamic school city, where people go for their Islamic education. And it's like the home of the mullah, pretty much. Um, Through there, we went to Kharanak, which is a deserted mud brick city. Then we went to Esfahan, Yazd, Sar Yazd. I'm missing something. Shiraz. I think I'm missing a few. But the the second time I stayed with friends that I'd met the first trip. So the second time I went on my own. First trip was with a small boutique kind of bespoke tourism group, and yes, I spent a week in Tehran just with my friend, living her life, doing everyday things. Some days we didn't even leave the house; we'd just watch movies and hang out. And then I moved on to Shiraz, and then with friends, I we just took a car and drove all the way down the south, so down to La, down to Bandar Abbas, into the Gulf, to Hormuz and Qeshm, and then we went. east, so we went out to Galaganj, Bam, Kerman, and so the Dashtalut Desert as well, and then made our way back to Shiraz. So yeah, second trip was south, and in May it was very, very hot, and Ramadan as well, which I didn't realize at the
Oh
time.
man.
So a bit challenging day to day, but then nights come to life, and you get to see the everyday life really.
So as you were talking, I'm looking at a map
Mm.
and just to, I mean, I know where Iran is, but
Mhm.
as far as cities go, I wanted to orient myself.
Yeah,
Seems like you were all over the place.
all over the place. Yeah,
That's
the only
amazing.
yeah, it was fantastic. It's really, really lovely and so diverse. It's very, very diverse, and that's not just geographically. That's linguistically as well, ethnic minorities as well, and food as well. So, yeah, very, very diverse country.
What were some things that let's let's say the first time you were there,
Hmm.
what were some things that you anticipated and what were some things that you didn't anticipate and what were some things that surprised you?
Oh yeah, everything surprised me, and I that was the reason I think why I booked that trip. But I think the theory of something and the reality of it can vary wildly, and this was at both ends of the spectrum. Both ends of the spectrum. I expected it to be. I did expect it to be a little. I expected to be confused, I think, is the reality of it. And I was, but in probably more perplexed, I think,
Mm,
because there was such a stark difference in what I am told or what I've experienced outside versus what I experienced inside. And I kind of went in thinking that I would be met with a lot of like a closed society, that it was very quiet, that I'd be an observer or something like that. And that is not the case whatsoever. I have never experienced kindness or hospitality anywhere besides, or anywhere in comparison to that
mm,
of an Iranian, whether that's inside Iran or out. It's just unparalleled.
yeah.
Yeah. So that was the biggest, I think. Um, Yeah, and the other thing is like just don't believe everything you read or hear. you know, I think it goes back to that curiosity and critical thinking and making sure that you just ask questions. Don't believe everything.
Mhm.
Mm.
That's a really valuable takeaway, I think. And I think it's so like I have friends in well, yeah, I don't talk to him that often, but I have a friend in Pakistan
Mm.
and he's so nice, like, super nice guy. I've known him for I don't know, like 10 years or so.
Mm.
And he moved when he moved back to Pakistan, he said, "Oh, you have to come visit me in Lahore." And I was like, "Yes, I will be
Yeah.
there. I can't wait." And then when I started telling people like, "Oh, I want to go to Pakistan. Like, I'm so excited." And everyone looked at me like, "No, you're not. You're not going to Pakistan." And I'm like, "But why? I was invited." And it's
Mm.
so interesting because I don't have to tell you this, but eh, what we see in the West of like, you know, the whole Gulf region or the whole
Hmm.
like Middle Eastern region is just like you would literally think that like nothing goes on there the way that it's portrayed in the news. And then when you open Instagram or look at a travel site or something and you see
Hmm.
this like, colorful, vivacious
Hmm.
communities and
Hmm.
societies, I want to see that more. I want I feel very strongly about this, so I'm not gonna
Yeah,
go
I
on
do
and on
too.
and on.
You're speaking to the right person because the events that we see and hear about are generalized, I think, few and far between. And there are tens and hundreds of millions of people that live in these regions that have their own everyday lives. Like it, they're still people. They still live day to day. They still have their own customs, their own, their jobs, families. Like that's what's so baffling to me. The disparate thoughts around what we're told and real life. It's
Mm-hmm.
really strange.
Yeah.
Really, really, really strange. And your feedback from your friends about wanting to go there was exactly the same as when I was talking about going to Iran. That I had people say, "No, you're not." Like flat out, "No, you're not." It's like, "Yes, I am." 2 days later, "Yeah, I think I'm going to go." "Not by yourself." "No, you're not." A couple of days later, "So I bought my ticket." "Really, by yourself?" "Yeah, why not? Why not?
Yeah.
Sure, why not?" Which is a very Persian phrase, I think. Like open to anything all the time. Sure, why not?
So the first time you went, you completely you were ready
Mm-hmm.
to learn Farsi and you come
Mm-hmm.
back to Australia. What were some of the first steps that you took to becoming familiar with Farsi?
Mm. Um, I'd like to say that I did jump back into study straight away, and while that's mostly the case, I also kind of went through a bit of a post-holiday blues period because it was such a significant shock for me, and I'd say probably culture shock coming back to Australia and understanding how loud and rude and just there's so I really felt there was so little substance to what we do here in Australia, both on a social sense or a lot of it felt empty or without purpose. So I was angry and I was kind of um, depressed or challenged, and just being so far away from experiences that had such, I don't know, like more intricate family ties and social ties, and coming back and not having that, I had to navigate that emotional sense before I could go back into the language. And then I kind of used the language, I think, at the start to claw back into that. But in terms of resources, YouTube was my best friend. I
Okay.
really felt that being here in Australia, getting Persian or Farsi resources was quite difficult, and very expensive. Very expensive. The more I developed or started looking, then the digger you deep into the internet, the more you find. So over time, I was able to find more resources, but YouTube was definitely where I started, and that was just basic grammar, and also
Okay.
learning the script. And then I think I'd say about 9 months into it, I tried to put my money where my mouth is and got a tutor on italki. It's like I need more answers. I need connection with someone to help me through this. I don't know of any other Persian learner, definitely not here in Sydney, or online that I could really reach out to. And it's like, well, how can I support someone and actually get informed in a regular way, or at least get back to some kind of structure in learning again, something that I hadn't done for 20 years. And on italki, I was so nervous, just so nervous. And as I was looking through teachers or tutors to find, I strategically found a tutor that had no classes yet. She was fresh to the platform. I was like, you know what? That's it. We are going to be in this together. And it worked a treat. She was so wonderful. And we are friends to this day. We ended up exchanging outside of that, um, after a while, outside of italki as well, because it kind of felt inappropriate because of the friendship that we'd built. And in exchange, I would help her with her English. So, yeah, I think that worked in my favor. But yeah, taking that risk from solo study to actually engaging with someone, whoa, yeah, that
Yeah.
was a challenge for me.
Oh yeah. That's
It
like, and
definitely
I
came back.
definitely can sympathize with the nervousness part. It's
Yeah.
just a whole different ball game too.
Yeah. There's just so much you don't know at
Yeah.
all, which is something I guess I'm currently facing with my new tutor. Oh, she's not really new now, but as my friendship kind of blossomed and grew with my previous tutor, it felt like weird to exchange because we're friends. So now it's just casual chatting and actual friendship. And my new tutor now is getting down that path as well. But the second tutor, or my current tutor, I found on Natakalam,
Mm.
and more, they really partner you very, very well. They ask you some questions straight up on your interests and things like that, your level, and so they really pair you with someone instead of just a transaction. And I've really felt, since moving to someone more in tune to my goals and skills, has kind of really springboarded me a lot. Um, so that's probably another significant or valuable resource that I would suggest for anyone moving into Persian, is using Natakalam. And yeah, I guess the confidence thing, having someone understand your goals, it kind of makes that a little bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
The 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 intermediate slog, as I like to call it, not a plateau, it's a slog for me. um, it comes with a lot of. I've found that it comes with a lot of acceptance work, or like that emotional work, or a lot of emotional intelligence work of really understanding where you are, what you want to talk about, how you express yourself. And that's a challenge in another language, I think. A lot of people don't do that work just not learning a language. So learning it through another language is quite tough.
Yeah.
And yeah, the only thing that I can kind of liken my current state to is it's like being in the ocean for me. So once you get into the ocean, um, everything's fine. Messing around in the shallow part, and you're like, yeah, I got this, I got this. And then you go out a bit deeper, and the sand just falls away from under your feet, and you're like, oh no, shit, like
Yeah.
I'm in an ocean.
Like
And
something
I
touched
know
my foot.
it's exactly that feeling, and you just have this false sense of like accomplishment on knowing so much, and then you're like, oh no, like that just falls from underneath you, and it's like, no, you're in the ocean now, baby, like you got to swim.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so fun.
Oh my gosh. I wanted to get to this later, but I'm going to ask you now. Is
Yeah,
there a Persian Farsi speaking community in Sydney?
there is. I have actually been very fortunate enough to meet some Iranians here in Sydney. One couple in particular own a very, very, I guess I'd say modern Persian cafe, and they playfully refuse for me to speak English when I go there. um, so I do thank them very, very much for that. So they are very, very lovely. And then there are, I still feel like I'm on the fringes, and that's something that I struggle with in a few ways, moving into a culture that's not mine, but also wanting to be a part of it, or learning as much as I can to be a part of it, and then thinking, do I actually have a place here or not?
Mm,
And then everyone is still very welcoming. It's like, it's a bit of a tug of war with me. But the Iranians here in Sydney that I have met have been so, so wonderful. Uh, there is, I think, I think I read in the last census there's like 25,000 Iranians here just in the greater Sydney area. That was, 4 or 5 years ago now, so I'm not too sure how that's changed too much. But there's a significant number here. Um, do I want to meet more? Yes. um, yeah, and I haven't yet fully integrated or functional in that community, because I'm not. still apprehensive on my intentional purpose on that, and how I fit in that, and why I fit in that, and how do I continue to contribute in that space. I
Yeah,
don't want to be just a taker, if that makes sense.
that makes complete sense. And I
Mm,
think that's admirable
mm,
to approach it that way. You're studying Farsi, and there's a different script in Farsi, right? Okay,
correct.
right. And you have a past with Japanese.
Hmm.
And I'm gonna assume that you also learned some scripts when you were studying
Correct.
Japanese.
Yeah.
Um, how were you able to, I guess, adapt the way that you learned the a different script, 20 years ago when you were studying
Yeah.
Japanese,
Hmm.
into currently learning this Farsi script? Were there any tools or anything that you were able to lean on to help you to start to learn this new script?
To lean on, no. But for a reason, I think. And for me, I guess first, it is still so fascinating to me that I actually chose two scripted languages from different families that, um, yeah, both different scripts, and also, they also, strangely enough, aren't gendered either. So I kind of did myself a favor on
Awesome.
that one.
Good choice.
Yeah. So I'm yet to encounter that challenge. That's future Candace's problem. Um, but the biggest factor, I think, that has contributed to me navigating that challenge would be acceptance. It's just realizing that you got to learn it, and they are what they are for their own reasons. Like their own, they've got their own purpose, their own structure. Um, as for themselves. So with Japanese, I want to say it was a little bit easier, not because I was younger, but more that mnemonics came into that heavily. So with its characters, you can have a visual reference of other things related to its meaning. I guess the primary examples that come to mind is like the character for no, you can have as no, and then on top of that, in similar stroke order, is the no smoking sign. So it kind of
Oh.
overlays, so you can have that visual reference to a sound with a similar meaning. So no and no, and it also is like kind of like a curled, circular
Hmm.
character. And another one is key. So ki is actually very similar to the shape of a key, artistically, a bit abstract,
Interesting.
but still.
Yeah.
Um, Mnemonics for me with Japanese, being such a visual learner, was a game changer. It really, yeah, really helped with my learning in that regard. For Persian, didn't no relationship whatsoever. It's completely different. But I think that's where acceptance comes into it again, right? So just knowing that it has its own rules and system, just deal with it.
Yeah.
It's not special to you. It's not going to change for you. And if anything, just get your hands dirty and start learning it. The one of the first times I actually saw the Farsi script, I distinctly remember thinking to myself, "This is impenetrable. Like I will never ever learn this." And I didn't have that feeling with Japanese at all. Um, and mnemonics don't come into Persian script at all. So it was like really having to learn it from scratch again. And, depending on the position of the letter in a word, it takes on a different shape. So it's not just learning the one shape for the one letter. You've got to learn, three different forms of that letter depending on where it sits in the word.
Oh my God.
Sometimes they're similar, sometimes they're not. And then added to that as well, only long vowels are commonly represented in the script, whereas short vowels are represented by diacritics above the prior letter. But
Okay.
diacritics are really only found in formal texts. So if you're reading everyday writing, social media, text messages from friends, and all that kind of stuff, you're not going to have diacritics. So there is a lot of guesswork and a lot of pronunciation practice for you to kind of guess a lot of it until you become familiar with this quote unquote spelling of that word.
Right.
Um, and I still, like 3 years in, I'm still guessing a lot. Yeah, guessing a lot. So
What
very, very different.
what has been helpful for you in your learning process? Has it been the speaking, the conversations? Has it been writing? Has it been reading?
Hmm. I think I've always tried to approach any language learning as balanced across those four skills because I don't want to. I'm quite self-preserving in that way, in that I don't want to do a lot of heavy lifting later if I've already done some work previously. I would rather move at a sustainable pace across all of them. And if it takes me longer to get confident, that's fine because I know that my skills are quite rounded. And I'm, as I develop in this intermediate stage, I'm finding that's not a reality. It's starting to become not so much of a reality because my goals are shifting.
Mm,
Still, I'm becoming tired of not being functional yet. And in society, I think speaking is, I'm not going to champion it by any shape or form, but if I'm going to be contributing to a community locally, I should be able to speak. I can't walk around handing letters to people. You know what
yeah.
I mean? So my focus has been conversational speaking on particular topics because it's very important to me to express myself to and how I'd inform that the listener, I guess, how I want to be perceived
Yeah.
to a degree. I want to be the same person in no matter what language I speak. And
Mm-hmm.
I get very frustrated if I can't express my thoughts or feelings or what I want to do or what I even do every day
Mm-hmm.
in a language. I'd like to be a functional human in any language.
I think that I don't think, I know. Um, I'm really excited that you said that because it's only recently, and I mean this year, like the past couple of weeks, where I'm thinking like, you take a language class and they want you to talk and they want you to, maybe talk to your neighbor like we did in school, or like, even if it's a language exchange, or not a language exchange, even if it's a class. And you always have a set amount of things you did that you can say, you can use, like, oh, I woke up at 7 a.m. I made myself a coffee. I put on pants. But there's and I realize this as I'm having language exchanges with people, I have to make up stuff because I don't have the vocabulary to say, like, if I did something like spring cleaning, or if I went to visit Santa at the mall, or if I, you know, cut myself chopping a cucumber. Like, I don't
Mm.
have that kind of
Yeah, yeah,
very like niche things that like happen to me.
yeah.
Um and I do like that you said, you want to be yourself in
Mm.
different languages, and I think that's really important, and I'm noticing that because, like, for me, like, I can't be myself. I still, like, no matter what time I wake up, if I'm talking to you in another language, I woke up at 7, I made myself a
Yeah,
coffee, I
scripted.
showered, I put on pants. So I think that is something that I would like to see more people be aware of, and more
Mm.
people, and maybe, and then I started thinking, it's not about me. It's not about me. I'm going to get back to this in a second. But then I started thinking, um, maybe that's something that comes as you advance. Like,
Mm,
why would you need to explain to somebody that you were opening a bottle of wine and the cork broke off and you couldn't
mm,
get it out if you
mm.
can't tell somebody the basic stuff? Like, I made a cup of
Correct.
tea and had some toast. So I
You
don't
don't drink
know.
wine for breakfast? No.
Oh, only on Fridays. But
But yes.
yeah, it just I have two minds about it, I think. But I do think as a Black woman also, in my community and when I'm trying to talk to people who are, not Black, um, there are things that I can't even explain to like another English speaking person about
Wow.
why we do these things in our community or like why these things are important in our community. How on earth am I going to find the vocabulary and the nuance to explain it to somebody in another language? And I want to have that ability to do so. So I'm saying that because I'm glad that you basically said,
Yeah.
about being yourself across different languages. I think it's so much more important than than I ever realized before.
I do recognize that it's a significant challenge, and in an educational setting where you're teaching, upwards of 20 people in a class, it's not feasible to go into the nuances as to people as an individual, their interests, their likes, how they communicate, what they do in their day, other than what nearly every single human does every day.
Yeah.
So there is definitely a cost benefit to doing that, especially with how short the classes are for an education. I think when you move out to pursuing a language as an adult, either through interest, through your career, or things like that, you can. There's a bit of liberty you can take, I think, with the design and how much time you want to invest in that. But a lot of it does come to there's like an unspoken percentage of brain space and time required to actually ask these questions of yourself, even in your own language. I think if you talking to another English speaker about who they are, what they do, they'd probably be hard pressed articulating it well in a native language, I
Hmm.
think, or personal. But until you understand that on a personal, as your own person, it's going to be very hard to curate or design your learning content around that, I feel. So it comes a lot of self-awareness, I think, and it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time and design and thought, and everyone's time poor, and people aren't willing to put that in. So I understand why a lot of people default to that. But for me, it's that search of value and connection that's really driving me, and also finding either content or communities that are similar to me that I can enjoy and give back to. And that's another thing that makes it slow, I think.
Yeah.
But it's rewarding for me, at least.
Yeah. It's
Mm.
important.
Yeah.
What are some things as you're learning, as you're on this journey, this path, what are some things about the language that you have come to really love? Um, whether it be the sound of something, whether it be the concept of how things are described, what are some things that you really enjoy so far?
Ooh, I really enjoy, firstly, the sound of it. It doesn't matter who's talking. I my ears just light up. Like I just love listening to it, and that's, I think, a key factor of it. I've been really intrigued by the depth of the language and the warmth of the language. I think English lacks a lot of emotion and ability to package concepts concisely, or particular emotions concisely, or experiences concisely. I think in Farsi there are things that you could be said in a sentence or an idiom or something like that that really you could really unpack, but you'd have to have a full paragraph in English to actually explain what it means. That's been fascinating. Um, what else? How, yeah, the warmth of the language has been really surprising and really lovely to experience. I guess conversely to that, one thing that I've really struggled with is the the sounds. Well, I guess it's the same thing, but it's also a struggle. Is the sound of the language. So for Australian English, we have around 20 vowel sounds, like including diphthongs and stuff like that. Persian has only between 6 and 8. So
Okay.
for me, audibly, and also my mouth muscles to map that, I've got such, it's like a filtration system, right? Like I've got this huge range of vowels that I use in my everyday life that I have to filter down or distill down into particular movements in my mouth or particular sounds. And I feel like I always miss the mark, always, especially around the OA sound. Yeah, that's a big challenge for me. Yeah, but it's still fascinating. I'll still run into that wall like as many times as I need to. Yeah, that determination has me to, yeah.
What has been one thing where you felt like really like overjoyed when you
Mm.
understood it? Did you have any like, I did it moments?
There, that's actually really fun for me right now. Being as you start to become functional in a language, it's not just, oh, they understood that word. It's like, oh no, they understood what I meant and they are now doing an action that I asked them to do, or they're responding to me without pulling me up on something. Like I think the genuine exchange has been quite rewarding, and I guess the most significant thing recently, or two things. So one is having whoever I'm talking to laugh or understand what I mean and laugh. That is gold for me.
It's
Um,
major.
it's so major. And to not correct me and they understand it. Well, either they're not telling me that I was wrong or they just understood what I meant. But still getting the reaction of my intent in saying something. That landing, that's like gold. The other thing is I recently bought a book through Instagram DM with a Persian bookstore, all in Persian. And I didn't, like, I just thought, okay, I'll do this. Like, they're a bookstore in Australia, in Perth, but I thought, no, you know what? This is a challenge. I'm going to give it a go. And I bought a book in Instagram DMs using Persian. And then I
Yes.
stopped and I read through the script. I was like, oh my God, I just bought something in Persian. So that is such a small, everyday functional task that I would have never thought I was able to do. And I only did it like, what, 2 months ago. But that's something that I still hold as like, yes, Candace, like you did it.
That's
Only,
terrific.
yeah, it's very small, but still a significant milestone.
Of
Um,
course. I love the little things. We have to celebrate the little
you
things.
do, you
Yeah.
do. Mm,
Oh man. Are
mm.
you I guess comprehension wise, um, for me, I think when I'm learning a language and comprehension is my big thing. When I'm
Oh
like,
yeah,
oh, I didn't have to ask them to repeat themselves. Like
yeah,
this deserves like a grilled cheese sandwich
yeah,
celebration or something.
yeah. Punching
Something
fists in the air by yourself.
exactly. This deserves, you know, this deserves a celebration. But I think that's phenomenal for you. I'm so excited.
Thank you very much. Yeah, but I'm totally with you on the comprehension stuff. You know, there's a difference. There is a distinct different feeling, I think, from following along with a conversation and getting the gist of it. Like, especially if you're listening to podcasts or things like that. It's like, yeah, I get the gist. Yeah, cool. I understood that sentence in. completely. I didn't understand that. Holy shit, that sentence had 3 clauses in it. I don't understand the full meaning of that. I understood where they kind of were going, but the full comprehension, yeah, totally with you on that. And that's why I'm trying to focus on reading at the moment, long clauses or novel, or trying to get to stories, because yeah, single clause sentences will only get you so far, especially
Yeah.
when you're talking as well. People
What
go off on tangents all the time.
so going forward, what are some of the things you hope to be able to do with the language and your proximity to the culture? Whether you
Mm.
know, personally or, you know, you don't have to get personal, but, you know, career or skills or anything like that. And if you are open to anyone reaching out to you, maybe to practice or to engage with you about Iran or about the language, tell us where we can reach you.
Awesome. So for personally, it's just to be functional and to find my place in the local community. I think that's a bit of a long game, and I just need to take more steps to doing it. There are 2 Iranian film festivals, or one's a Persian film festival, the other's Iranian film festival that we have here in Australia. So I've been to the Persian Film Festival, I think the last 2 or 3 years. So that's very fun. I'd love to get into a volunteering space there just to contribute. The Iranian Film Fest is in June, so I'm hoping to. Well, I've actually taken time off so I can hang out, and when it's ready, I'll try and volunteer there as well. And I'd like to travel to Melbourne if all things stay okay, to visit some Iranian friends that I have down there and actually hang out with them during the festival and, do that. So that's the first thing. I think continuing to find my space in the community. Professionally, I've not really thought about that. I, similar to you, like the education thing is not my jam. I I don't feel it's my calling or even my place to teach the language. I think if anything, would be, mm, yeah, I can't see myself in a professional setting, especially with the sanctions over there as well.
Mm,
Migrating there as a career, short term or not, would be significantly challenging. Um, Plus, I have a life and a relationship and cats and stuff here that it would be a complete deviation. I think there's yeah, I'm yet to explore that professionally. But the one thing that I'm trying to do at the moment is, after the Polyglot conference last year, I was inspired to make an Instagram page for myself. Once, I guess, to help keep myself accountable, to try and output more, to try and pass on information that I'm sharing. I am by no means an authority. It's just stuff that I find that's interesting, connections that I make, development in my language. So I use that Instagram account to kind of share those things. Again, that is still slow, and I'm still trying to find my feet and my voice within that. So you can find me there at the Farsi, which is FAR dot no, sorry, THE dot FAR dot SEE, not I. So a bit of a play on words, being here down under in Australia, quite far away, and being an observer as well. So try to use a bit of a pun on what
very
I'm trying to do there.
clever. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you would love to exchange, please reach out to me. Yeah, if you want to correct any of my shonky posts, please correct me. But yeah, I'm more than open to that idea.
Awesome. Thank you so much for
Oh, thank
sharing. And
you.
thank you so much for this conversation. And I really
It's okay.
enjoyed talking with you and hearing about your passion for Farsi and for
It's all
Iranian
right.
culture. And I wish you so much success. Like, I want you to come back in some form, not like, you
Sure.
know, a ghost, but like in some some way.
How funny.
In a year or two,
Okay,
so I can check in on your progress, and
please.
not like I need to check in on your progress. You'll be
Yeah,
fine.
I know.
But you know what I mean? Like maybe some listeners will want to know, like, I wonder if she's fluent by now, or
Mm,
if there's any other cool things that she has to share.
cool.
So you're welcome back anytime,
Thank you
to
kindly.
come and chit chat and have some laughs and stuff. So
It's all right.
the last question I have for you, I like to end each episode on the same question, and it's your turn this time. Do you have any jokes, tongue twisters, cool slang words, idioms, words of wisdom, or words of advice in Farsi or in Japanese to share?
Mm. I'm going to outright say no for Japanese because it is that rusty.
Fair enough.
um, and I don't want to cause offense to anyone or embarrass myself. But for Farsi, there's probably three. I can do them quickly if you would like.
Okay, but you
Um,
have to teach them to me. That's
they're small. That's okay.
okay.
That's all right. So slangs can be like a little difficult to traverse, I think, with the formality of the language sometimes, and slang typically evolves so quickly anyway. So if you come into a conversation with slang from 10 years ago, they're going to go, okay, cool, thanks, guy. um, and I think with the formality of it being a fresh face, it's a little bit challenging. So I'll kind of keep them as polite as possible. Um, a common one that is used among friends to congratulate them on something that's well done, or like way to go, or oh, that's so cool, is it's like an expression of appreciation or gratitude, I think. It's damet gam.
Damet gam.
Yeah, correct. So dam is breath, et is your second person singular possessive suffix, so like your, and then gam is warm. So it's like may your breath be warm is what it directly translates to, symbolizing that you hope that they'll be alive for a long time.
Oh,
So that's really cool.
yeah.
I think it's informal but not impolite. So it's more like, well done, bro, like, way to go. Um, Conversely, on the more negative side of the interactions, and very informal and very colloquial, is if your friends are laughing at you or mocking you, or if they're doing your favorite thing without you, it's like, I guess, a version of shut the hell up. It's like, why are you laughing at me? Stop laughing. And it's Zahre Mar.
Zahremar.
Yeah. And so directly translated, that means snake venom.
Whoa, I like
So
that.
it's like a vehement equivalent. It's quite expressive and very informal and impolite, but it's like, shut the hell up, leave me alone, like, stop it.
Mhm.
So Zahre Mar, it's, yeah, snake poison. So um, pick and choose wisely and not in a first interaction, please.
Yes. Save the
uh,
drama and intrigue for
correct, correct. Catch him off guard when
Right.
they're your friend. But my favorite idiom that really captures the poetic and warm nature of the language and the culture is golposteru nadare. So socially, it's quite rude to have your back to someone in Iran. So whether you're getting into a cab and sitting down, or whatever, having your back to someone is, because it's like a courteous thing, right? So
Yeah.
if you ever find yourself in this position, and if you excuse yourself from having your back to someone, the reply you'll get is gol poshtaru nadare, which means a flower has no front or back. That's
Oh my
very
god.
sweet.
That's
Very, very sweet.
adorable.
Yeah, so that's
Okay,
one of
what
them.
is it? Go
So gol,
Gol?
Gol, gol, which is flower,
Oh,
and then posht oru, so back and front.
Post oru
Yeah, nadare.
nadare.
Yeah, so na is the negative form, and dare is your third person singular form, like to have. So you don't have. So a flower doesn't have a front or a back. So sweet.
I love that.
Yeah, it's very lovely. So we're going highs from lows here.
Yeah, yeah,
Quite a
no,
compliment.
you gave it a well-rounded, thoughtful answer to that
Yeah.
question.
They're
Thank
my
you.
three favorite. They're my three
Yeah.
favorite.
Oh man. Thank you so much for sharing those.
Thank you for your time. It's
Yeah,
been
and
a lot of
thanks.
fun.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed talking with you and learning so much about your journey that you're
Thank you.
on to Farsi. And like I said, please come back. You're welcome anytime. I'd
Yay.
love to check in with your progress and see how you're doing. Before I let you go, do not think about this hard at all. But in this situation, what would be the best way to say goodbye in Farsi?
I would say Felan.
Felan.
Felan. And it means for now. Yeah, just for now.
I like
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I think it's heavily colloquial, maybe a Tehrani dialect,
Hmm.
but it just means for now.
For
So,
now.
yeah.
Candace, Felan.
Felan El Junan.
And I will be talking to you soon.
Amazing.
Bye.
Bye bye.